El Bolson, a haven nestled amidst the Patagonian Andes, breathed tranquility. Crisp mountain air, fragrant with pine and damp earth, filled Tom Harris's lungs. A tapestry of emerald hills and sapphire lakes unfolded before his rustic cabin. Tom, a ghostwriter by trade, found solace in the rhythm of words. His days were painted with the hues of nature, each sunrise a promise of a blank page. He lived a solitary existence, his only companions the whispers of the wind and the clatter of his trusty typewriter. It was in this tranquil isolation that Tom crafted tales for others, stories that breathed life into forgotten dreams. The morning light filtering through the pines was Tom's cue to start his day. He rose with the sun, his day as predictable as the mountain shadows that stretched across the landscape. A steaming cup of coffee, its aroma a comforting companion, fueled his creativity and set the tone for the hours ahead. His fingers danced across the worn keys of his typewriter, each keystroke a step in his daily ritual. The rhythmic clatter of the keys was a familiar melody in the silent cabin, a soundtrack to his thoughts. Words flowed effortlessly, weaving tales of love, loss, and adventure, each sentence a brushstroke on the canvas of his imagination.
Each story was a journey, a new world waiting to be explored, each character a reflection of my own solitary musings, a piece of my soul captured in ink.
He wrote until the sun dipped behind the Andes, casting long shadows and signaling the end of another day. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking finale to his creative endeavors, until, that is, the arrival of an email, breaking the tranquility of his routine, its subject line stark and unsettling. A story that writes itself, hinting at a mystery that awaited him. The email was from an anonymous client shrouded in digital secrecy. The sender's identity was hidden behind layers of encryption, making it impossible to trace. The request was unusual, a story based on detailed outlines provided, each chapter delivered with unnerving promptness. The precision of the instructions was almost mechanical, leaving no room for deviation. The pay was generous, too generous. But something about the clandestine nature of the project set Tom on edge. The money transferred into his account without delay, yet it felt like a bribe to ignore the growing unease.
Anonymous clients were not unheard of in the world of ghostwriting. They often sought discretion for various reasons, but this felt different.
Yet the specificity of the outlines, the chilling realism of the narratives gnawed at him. Each chapter seemed to peel back layers of his own life, revealing secrets he thought were well hidden. He felt a growing sense of foreboding, like an actor handed a script that mirrored his own life with unsettling accuracy. The stories were not just fiction, they were a reflection of his deepest fears. The chapters arrived with clockwork regularity. Each new email brought a fresh wave of anxiety. As if the sender knew his every move, each one was a chilling vignette filled with details that felt eerily familiar. The stories were like pieces of a puzzle, fitting together to form a picture he was afraid to see. The line between fiction and reality began to blur. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was living out the chapters, trapped in a narrative he couldn't control. The coincidences became too frequent, too precise to ignore. It was as if the universe itself was reading his stories and deciding to play along, turning fiction into reality. The antique compass he had written about disappearing from his study, just as he had described it in his latest chapter, was the first sign. Then came the sudden illness of a shopkeeper he had described in vivid detail, down to the very symptoms and the exact day it would happen. His fictional world was bleeding into his reality, each stroke of his typewriter seemingly shaping the world around him. It was as if his imagination had gained a life of its own, dictating the events of his everyday life.
Fear, cold and clammy, tightened its grip. The more he wrote, the more he felt like a puppet in his own story, controlled by the very words he created.
He paced his cabin, the once comforting confines now feeling like the bars of a cage. The walls seemed to close in on him, echoing the claustrophobic tension of his own narratives. Sleep offered no escape, his dreams haunted by half-remembered scenes from his stories. Each night he relived the terror of his own making, unable to distinguish between dream and reality.
I tried to confide in Miguel, the owner of the local cantina. He had always been a good listener, someone who could offer a different perspective. But the words caught in my throat, sounding absurd even to my own ears. How could I explain that my stories were no longer just stories, but a terrifying reality I couldn't escape?
The email arrived at midnight, chapter 12, The Reckoning. The subject line sent a chill down his spine.
Driven by a desperate need for answers, I plunged into a frantic investigation.
He scoured the internet, trying to trace the anonymous email address, each dead end fueling his paranoia. He revisited the details of the story, searching for clues, for any hint of the client's identity.
I was a man possessed, my life consumed by the need to unravel the mystery. My sanctuary had become my prison, the walls closing in with every frantic heartbeat.
He sat at his typewriter, the once familiar machine, now an ominous presence. The final chapter. The client's instructions were explicit: rewrite the ending. Instead of the protagonist's escape, a gruesome demise.
My fingers hovered over the keys, my body rebelling against the words forming in my mind.
He could feel the client's presence, a spectre hovering over him, urging him to type, to seal his fate with each keystroke.
I shut my eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the wrinkles on my face. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sacrifice my soul on the altar of a stranger's twisted narrative.